along with the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, to this discussion of the report of the Commission on Inquiry on Human Rights in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The Commission of Inquiry, for those of you who do not know, was established last March and issued its report in February of this year. For those of us who followed North Korea, there was no surprise in its conclusion that the North Korean government is responsible for a combination of, quote, murder, enslavement, torture, imprisonment, rape, and grave sexual violence among the many crimes against humanity perpetuated by that government, and that, quote, the gravity, scale, and nature of these violations does not have any parallel in the world. The Commission of Inquiry's report was particularly valuable, though, in the testimony that it brought to bear against these crimes, including more than 80 witnesses at public hearings and 240 confidential witnesses and other victims at closed testimony. It's a particular pleasure for us at the Foreign Policy Initiative to co-host this event with the Committee on Human Rights in North Korea, which is playing a critical role in bringing attention to this question, and in particular in support of the Commission of Inquiry in this work. It's worth noting as evidence of HRMK's important role in this effort that its studies are cited more than 20 times in the Commission of Inquiry's final report. Before we begin with our panel, it's a pleasure to welcome Ambassador Robert King, who's the Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights Issues at the United States Department of State, will offer a few remarks to kick off our discussion. Ambassador King has served at the State Department since November 2009, and his long service in government includes more than 25 years on Capitol Hill, principally as Chief of Staff to former member of Congress, Congressman Tom Lantos from California, a leader on human rights issues, and in which capacity he often served concurrently in important leadership roles on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Mr. Ambassador.
When I became the Special Envoy for North Korea Human Rights 4 years ago, we had a track record of about 6 resolutions in the UN Human Rights Council and in the UN General Assembly calling attention to the North Korean human rights issues. The thing that has been very interesting is that in the last 4 years, we've made a great deal of progress in terms of continuing both resolutions in the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council. But the most important thing was the effort to create the Commission of Inquiry that was done just a year ago. One of the things that I think needs to be mentioned is the important role that human rights organizations played in terms of pressing for the creation of this Commission of Inquiry. Governments were initially a little skittish about getting into something like that. It was groups like Human Rights, Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, and other NGOs that really led the charge in terms of calling for the creation of this Commission of Inquiry. And I'm delighted that we were able a year ago, in resolution adopted in the Human Rights Council, to create the Commission of Inquiry, and now a year later we're looking at the report and the effort of that commission. A couple of quick comments. I was just in Geneva last week where the commission was discussed in the Human Rights Council. The thing that I think has been significant with regard to this particular Commission of Inquiry is the extent to which it has been an open, a clear, a transparent process of gathering information, of discussing information, and disseminating information. Members of the Commission, Michael Kirby, the Australian Justice, Marzuki Darusman, the former Prosecutor General of Indonesia, who has been the Special Rapporteur on North Korean human rights for the last 4 years, and Sonia Bezerko, a prominent Serbian civil rights activist. The three of them represent very different perspectives on these issues, and they've brought a good balance to the Commission. But the thing that's been most important is that the Commission has held public hearings in Seoul, in Tokyo, in London, in Washington, and not only have they been public hearings, they've been videoed. The transcripts of those sessions have been prepared, and that material is all available online at the Human Rights, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights website. The process has been very important because the commissioners have been denied access to North Korea. They've been denied access to other places that they would like to visit. And I think it's been important that they've been able to go through and talk with those who've left North Korea and specialists who study North Korea, including some of the members of the panel who are speaking here this afternoon. So I think it's an important process that's been useful in calling attention to the North Korean human rights issues. We're continuing that effort. We'll continue to call attention to human rights issues in the United Nations in New York and in other areas where the Commission's report will be discussed and studied. But I'm delighted to be here with you this afternoon to hear the specialists that are going to be presenting information on North Korea. We appreciate the work that all of you are doing, and we appreciate in particular your interest and your commitment on the issue of North Korean human rights. Thank you very much.
Welcome our first panel. Please come up to the table. Melanie, Kirkpatrick, and Hyeonseo. Melanie is a writer based out of Connecticut. She's also a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. She was formerly deputy director of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. If you have not read her book, I can't commend it more highly. Escape from North Korea, The Untold Story of Asia's Underground Railroad. In the foreword to her book, Melanie notes that, which was conducted principally through interviews with defectors from North Korea, that the conversations offered, in quotes, a glimpse of the potential of the North Korean people, what they and their country could become if they were liberated. And that sentiment is a wonderful opportunity to introduce Ms. Hyeonseo, who embodies what the North Korean people can accomplish once liberated. She escaped to China from North Korea in 1997. In 2008, she moved to South Korea. She's a student at Hanguk University of Foreign Studies, is an advocate for fellow refugees. Many of you have hopefully seen her in her previous remarks delivered at a TED presentation. Being far too modest, Ms. Lee asked me to remind you that she's still a student of the English language, although she is an exceptional speaker of English, and look forward to your conversation with Melanie today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I left North Korea in 1997 and I lived in China for about 10 years before coming to South Korea. And after learning that my family needed to escape North Korea, so I went back to the border to guide them through China to safety. These days I'm passionate about improving human rights situations. So today I would like to talk about the human rights violations in the Kim Jong-un era and gives North Koreans perspective on some of the problems that North Korean people face and address some of the potential solutions. North Koreans really spend their lives entirely, inside virtual prison without even knowing about the concept of human rights, or they are subjected to oppression. As a North Korean, from the moment I was born, I was fed propaganda, and some of my first words were Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un. Throughout my childhood, I sang songs praising our country and our leaders. So I never thought about, it took me so many years to learn about the truth about my country. So while I was staying in North Korea, I never thought about freedom of speech, press, movement, and religion. Not knowing about the outside world, the oppressive life in North Korea seems normal. And when I was 7, I was really shocked when I saw my first public execution. A man was hanging by his neck under a bridge, and we could often see the flyers posted by the government about the time, date, place of a public execution. And schools, sometimes we cancelled the classes so the students could witness the public execution. And attendance was mandatory, and the people who saw the public execution were usually terrified. At the time, I didn't understand why every student was forced to observe the public execution, but now I understand that this was the government way of warning that anyone thinking about protesting the regime, anyone can be publicly executed. And people in North Korea also were terrified of the political prison camp. When I was growing up, I heard about them from my parents, but they weren't called prison camp. We were always so scared about them because we knew that anyone went inside, we couldn't leave, and even after dying, they would be buried there. The camps always inspired fear inside us, precisely because we weren't exactly sure what was going on inside there. When I finally found out the truth in South Korea, I learned the camps were worse than I imagined. We had to be careful about what we said between each other or in public in order to avoid to send to a prison camp. One of my distant relatives who came to North Korea during the 1970s from China thought North Korea was going to be a communist utopia as the North Korean government advertised, but a few years later he discovered that propaganda was not true, so he decided to cross back into China, but unfortunately he was caught by the border guards and eventually he was sent to the political prison camp. He was sentenced to 30 years and his son was only a baby at the time. After he grown up, he visited the prison camp for his father total 3 times, but every time he was denied access. Around the turn of the century, his family received the news that his term was finally finished, but he still wasn't free. He was forced to live in a designated area just outside the camp. So 2 years later, he died, and his family still couldn't retrieve his body for a proper burial. I was lucky once in North Korea because my parents, I never experienced hunger even during the famine, but others were not so lucky. One day in 1995, I went to my friend's home after school with her, but it was already 1 p.m., but their family didn't prepare anything for the lunch, so I felt so hungry. I complained to her that whenever she came to my home, my family fed her meals, even snacks, so I thought their family were very stingy. And she reluctantly took me her family's kitchen and showed me a pot that had barely anything inside of it. I was so stunned when I looked inside. Still, I don't know what was the food, but I was kept thinking myself, this isn't food for human. Why don't they have normal food? But a few months later, I discovered the answer when my mom brought home a letter from a Caucasus sister. It read, when you read this, all 5 family members will not exist in this world because we haven't eaten for the past week and we are lying on the floor together and our bodies are emaciated. We are ready to die. I was so shocked. This was the first time I heard that people in my country is suffering. And when I saw so many people starving and begging on the streets, I started thought that North Korea's propaganda, that North Korea is the best in the world. Because we always thought that capitalism was a sickness that would lead to societal decay. But I didn't see how communism could be better when people dying, begging on the streets. Even my teachers had stopped teaching so they could earn a little money for their families. And even though the people were starving, but the elite and within the militaries were supported by the food donations from abroad. The regime exploited these situations to its own benefit and manipulated these donations by claiming that this from the US and South Korea were the spoils of war. The rice and other donations are supposedly tribute to North Korea for winning the Korean War and for being militarily superior. These are just some of the many examples that in North Korea about the human rights violations that my family and I experienced. But I was really fortunate because I was able to escape North Korea and to South Korea finally. But others haven't been fortunate enough because they don't have a chance to learn the true meaning of freedom and human rights. Currently, they are still struggling under the Kim dynasty, this time under the new leader Kim Jong-un. Actually, when Kim Jong-un took power over, there's some positive optimism that North Korea might be changed, but despite the superficial changes, the regime even has become more oppressive. So let me briefly describe the deteriorating situations for North Koreans and North Korean refugees under Kim Jong-un, who warned that defectors would be executed on site and the families would be eliminated if anyone defects. So under his rule, the authorities continue to send the large numbers of people to the prison camps, and others were forcibly relocated to desolate mountainous areas where it is extremely difficult to survive. In a recent development under Kim Jong-un, North Korea was using its military to demolish homes and villages near the border with China along the Tumen River to prevent the defection. In one village in Hyeonseo, North Hamgyong province, was around 100 homes reportedly destroyed because in the area the Tumen River gets narrow as it passes Hyeonseo, so it was a really popular spot for North Koreans to cross into China. Activists in South Korea who helps North Korean defectors told that one Hyeonseo resident was killed by a firing squad after being captured in the attempt to defect. Furthermore, the authorities have been putting cameras, landmines, camouflaged traps, and barbed wire fences with noise makers along the major defection routes. So during this time, my hometown of Hyeonseo was increasingly used as a defection route. So the authorities installed electronic walls and other devices to detect the cell phone activities, and they reinforced the bed inspections to make sure nobody left. So according to the data from the South Korea's Ministry of Unification, the number of North Korean defectors in the Kim Jong-un era has been significantly lower than previous years. The UN report, the UNCOI report, also documented about the unfortunate situation for North Korean women in China. Of those who escape North Korea are mostly a woman, and many of them are not fully aware of the dangers they face when they're crossing the border into China. They often believed that they could earn a little money for their families back home, but in reality they are sold as sex slaves and wives in China, where the gender imbalance has driven up the demand for women. Conditions for these women are usually atrocious, and they live in indescribable and physical and emotional agony. One of the girls I know, she was sold as sex slave when she was 16, just after crossing the border. She served many men every day, and she never got paid, and she was beaten constantly. But miraculously, one of her customers felt sorry for her, so he helped her to make a daring escape. But this kind of story is extremely rare. Most women try to flee, but many times unsuccessfully, so others felt hopeless, so they do not attempt to escape unless they receive outside help. Certain individuals and organizations in China, they try to help these women to find refuge in a third country, but this is also very difficult because in this kind of situation, usually these women are traded as merchandise, so they are closely guarded by their pimps or husbands and their families. So only a small percentage of North Koreans who enter China ever make it to safety in a third country like South Korea. Despite all the misery and oppression that North Korean people endure, but there is some positive signs that North Korean community society is continuing to change despite all the government efforts to brainwash them. The use of cell phone is helping change North Korean people's minds. In the early 2000, I started to have phone call with my family from China, and whenever we had the phone call, it was a really huge hassle because my family had to hide that they're using Chinese cell phones. Because only those living near the border could pick up Chinese cell phone signals and could call out of North Korea. So the authorities continued to try to detect the cell phone activities. So my family couldn't really make a phone call very often in their home. So they tried many ways, like in the mountain and under the ground and the desolate places to avoid people. But yeah, North Korea is always changed. 2 years later, when my brother was talking to his ex-girlfriend in my hometown near the border, he noticed something strange in the background. It sounded like people talking and cars driving, so he was so stunned when she told him exactly where she's talking to in the middle of a crowded street. So my brother asked how it was possible, and then she said, these days many North Koreans use North Korean cell phone in the middle of the street, so the North Korean government couldn't figure out if she's making domestic call or calling South Korea. So I'm expecting more information to flow into the Heavenly Kingdom. Also, North Koreans are also being increasingly exposed for foreign media, and outside information and DVDs and USBs are spreading in many parts of North Korea. So we must continue to send information inside North Korea and promote people-to-people exchange so that North Korean people can gain more understanding about the outside world. In Russia, the people believed in Lenin and Stalin for many years, but gradually the new generation started believing as they got more information and learn about the truth. So similarly, as more information continue to reach the North Korean people, they are realizing the truth about the North Korean regime's propaganda. Many hope for change, but they live in an environment of fear and punishment. So they either attempt to escape or they silently endure. They clearly need our help, and we might be only their hope. One of the most important ways to promote change inside North Korea is helping North Korean refugees, I guess. Because most North Korean refugees, including the number of 28,000 in South Korea, they are struggling to adjust new environment in South Korea because they didn't receive proper education and job training in North Korea. North Korean refugees act as a crucial bridge between the inside North Korea and the outside world because many of us stay in contact with the family members inside still, and then we send information and money that is helping change North Koreans' mind. So therefore, I hope the international community also focus on helping the struggling North Koreans so that we can continue to promote change inside North Korea, and we can reveal the truth to all brothers, sisters inside North Korea. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Hyeonseo, for that powerful and very moving presentation. The horror you describe of everyday life in North Korea is truly heartrending, and your own personal story of how you overcome it is very inspiring. I'm reminded of the comment that the great American novelist Mark Halperin made about North Korea. He said what's happening there is a slow-motion Holocaust, and the horrific conditions you described really bear out that comment. I'm going to engage in a Q&A with Hyeonseo for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll open the floor up to your questions. I thought I would like to ask you to expand a little bit more on your thoughts on the Commission of Inquiry and all of that. But first, let me ask you about the United Nations. When you were a little girl growing up in North Korea, had you ever heard of the United Nations, and what was the image of the United Nations there?
Actually, I think the majority in North Korea, they don't know about what United Nations, but I knew that because I saw there's an ace from the United Nations and other ace. But usually in North Korea, they don't have really good impression on United Nations because the North Korean media, they describe the United Nations as a puppet of the United States. Because when the Korean War, the US and UN worked together, they invaded North Korea. We just talked like that. So that's not really big.
How about the United States? What were you taught about the United States in North Korea?
When I was elementary student, it started, the propaganda. Like, we sang songs about the killing the American soldiers, and we have a textbook, like even in the math textbook, there's a featured lessons, like here you see 5 American bastards. Those can military killed 2, so you guess how many American bastards are left. Like that. So again, in the school we had a lot of painting on the wall, which is really huge size. There's a North Korean military, with a bayonet stabbing the American soldiers, and the Japanese, South Korean, like that. So we just always thought the Americans not human, that we should kill or we should hate. Or also, actually it's interesting in North Korea that UK people described as gentlemen in North Korea, but the US is as bastards. So actually it took me quite a long time to understand it, to accept Americans as normal human.
Do you remember the first American you ever met?
Actually, for us, I can't figure out who's American or UK, or just all stand for me who has a Western face or look like American. But yeah, actually, I met the Americans from South Korea actually, and then for the first time, I have a quite long distance, but I need to learn English, so I have no choice. I need something have tutoring. But later I just found that they have a really good heart, more than me. So I just slowly, with the, friendship or relationship, I just found they are really good.
Thank you. Do you think that news about the findings of the United Nations Commission of Inquiry report are going to will the news make its way into North Korea? And if so, how is it going to get there?
There's somehow it will be reached into North Korea because there's many channels to reach into North Korea these days. Because many North Koreans use North Korean cell phone or either Chinese cell phone, they're contacting with the families inside North Korea. That's one way. The another way is, there's a news spreading companies they have operating between the North something for the reports, so they also have another way to contact. And organizations, NGOs, they send informations or USB or something. So I think they're gonna reach for that. But the problem is when the North Koreans, they after heard about these reports, their reactions. I'm just interested how much they're gonna interesting for that. But I don't think they know about what is this. Because first of all, they don't know about UN that much, and then they just have a hard time to living their own life. So I don't think they're really gonna care about that. Especially they don't know about the concept of human rights, because we don't have the words in North Korean human rights words. But somehow we're gonna impact rather than we don't have.
It's very interesting to me that you described methods by which information is getting into North Korea. You mentioned USB drives, radio programs, phone conversations between North Koreans and their relatives who have already escaped, NGOs. Is all of this information having any impact on North Korean attitudes to the rest of the world?
Actually, yeah, it does. When North Koreans, when they first time, or heard about this issue or started, they had thoughts. Do I need to believe this or not? Because they always consider it for because there's a lot of South Korean drama when flew into North Korea, and then when North Koreans were the first time when they're watching that, they couldn't believe that is real life in South Korea.
You mean TV soap opera dramas?
Yeah. Because the North Korean government at that time, they put on the public lectures, they said don't trust about the media, about the South Korean dramas and movies, because they made it on purpose for brainwash North Korean people. So people believe that actually, but some of my other friends said, the first time maybe they believed that what government said, but second time, third time, they really addicted to see that. So many times they watched it continuously and then they just believed it. So I think it's going to take some time for them to understand.
How about North Koreans who are hiding in China? You hid in China for 10 years. That's an amazing thing. At any moment, you could have been arrested and sent back to North Korea, where you would have been put in jail for the crime of having left your country. So are the North Koreans in China better informed about what the outside world is like? Is the COI report going to reach them?
I think, actually, because that's in China, it's impossible. First of all, the Chinese government, they're not going to put this on the media publicly. Even if they do, because North Koreans are having hard life, especially in China, they must hide, and so they don't really have time to focus on what the current issues on the medias, and usually they are sold, to the countryside as bright. So I don't think they really have a chance to read these reports. But another one way it's possible, there's South Korean church organizations in China to help North Koreans to get out of there. So I think they're going to inform these issues for them. So a pretty small percentage.
Without revealing anything that could endanger anybody, could you tell us how you communicated with your family in North Korea when you lived in China and then when you lived in South Korea? How did you contact them?
The only way, I gave them Chinese cell phone early 2000, so more than 10 years we had a phone call. So it was a really fantastic way to contact with them. So each week, once a week, something we had.
You would have a phone call. They would turn on their Chinese cell phone and you would call them?
When I was living in China, they could call me because since there's 2 Chinese cell phones, but after I moved to South Korea, they can't make a international phone call. So we made agreement before I leave China. I said every Sunday from the 1 p.m. open the phone. So just waiting my phone calls. Like that, we just had a communication.
How did you deliver the Chinese cell phone to them?
There's many ways we can send from the river, the Amno River, for smuggling. There's many people send for that because if we pay money for Korean Chinese, they goes there for that. Also, how I sent was I have one man, Chinese, he's Korean Chinese, he's businessman. He opened shop in North Korea in Hyeonseo, which is my hometown. So he owns the shop, so he's free to visit North Korea between China freely. So I just paid him money. So whenever I need sent to North Korea, he just did it for me. But in the end, I couldn't contact him. So later I found that he was in North Korea's jail because he was convicted as a spy because he was trying to take in some secret picture in North Korea. So North Korean government put him in a jail. Later he was kicked out of there.
Well, that's an amazing thing to think, that you couldn't freely call your own family in North Korea. The crackdown is so intense, the regime is so afraid of information that they even cut that contact. Well, let me open the floor up to questions now, if I may, and if you could, please stand and identify yourselves. Yes, sir.
I'm Hugh Humphrey. I'm an intelligence analyst. Is the report being translated?
There's a microphone for you.
Is the report being translated into Korean? And of the methods you mentioned for smuggling information into North Korea, let's say 2 more, balloons and bottles thrown into the ocean. Message in a bottle works too. Of the 6 methods we've mentioned, recognizing that resources are limited. If you had $500,000 to get information from North Korea, which method would you use?
Yes, the question is, if you
You've got DVDs, you've got USBs, you've got phone calls, you've got balloons, you've got drifting bottles at sea.
What methods?
You've got radio broadcasts.
What methods are most effective to get information to people in North Korea?
What information?
Yeah.
I think the truth about the outside world, exactly what's going on.
But I have money to spend on 6 methods of getting information to North Korea. Where should I spend it?
만약에 50만 불이 있다면 어떤 수단으로 정보를 전해줄 수 있는지, 어떤 방법이 제일 효과적인 방법인지, 북한 주민들에게 정보를 전달해 줍니다.
Because actually it's really hard to get the real point for that. There's no clear answer for that, since it's really hard. The North Koreans everything, but I think what my idea is the most fast way and clear way is to between North Korean refugees and the family members inside, the relatives and family members. Because the North Koreans always have thought minds, if the outside the world, you should trust this is all you have bad things. They don't believe really easily. But if a family member is saying this is true, everything, they easily to accept everything than anyone. So this is the most effective way. Other ways, a balloon or other informations, it does effect, but still it's pretty shallow. I guess we need to more continue for a long time for that.
This is a very important point that she makes. North Koreans are very suspicious of the outside world because they've been trained, they've been educated to be suspicious. But because the country has been slowly cracking open in recent years, they're getting information from people they trust. Like, as Hyeonseo said, their family members or their friends who've left. So putting money into refugee organizations that can help to get information to North Korea is a way to help North Koreans find out more about the outside world and actually believe it. Claudia Rosette?
Yeah, thank you.
There's a mic coming.
To ask the big question, is it possible for North Korea to become a free society as long as the Kim family is still in power? And second part of the question, if the Kim family falls, then what happens? If the government ends, which is what we're talking about really, right? Can you tell us what you think might come?
The first two questions, if the regime didn't change, there's no free ever you can't expect. That's totally impossible. And after the regime, what was the second question? Sorry for
If it falls, what happens?
Yeah, that's also, if it falls, I think there's a lot of also the troubles following, because I think many North Koreans want to come down to South Korea first of all, or I think already there's many South Koreans planning to investments in real estate in North Korea. So, or there's many companies gonna move up to North Korea, and because since North Korean labor is pretty cheap, so I understand for South Koreans owners' position, but as for North Korean situation, like since they have a lot of cloud, or North Koreans have they don't have a really open mind, so they thought this is like another slavery system. They work for cheap price for South Koreans in the factories. So there's a lot of, I think that's also going to be a huge problem we need to face, but we can't change that. So that's I think how we can reduce this, we need to think about that for the future when the unification comes.
Well, I think North Koreans such as yourself are helping to change the attitudes of many South Korean people and helping to educate them about the potential of the North. Yes, sir.
My name is Jung Yabu from the Asan Institute in South Korea.
Mr. Covey, when he visited Seoul for interviewing, he mentioned to the press that he was surprised not only by the testimony that defectors made to him, but also by the fact that it seems South Koreans do not have enough interest in this issue. So, as a North Korean defector who has lived in Korea, whether you feel like that Koreans seem not to have enough attention on these issues, or if you feel so, why do you think the South Korean public or South Korean politicians or government do not have enough interest in this North Korean human rights issue?
Actually, I want to ask them. But it's one thing I found in South Korea, the truth, what you asked me, was really sad, because the majority of South Koreans, they don't really not care about this, they don't interest on these issues. Because since we separated for, I think, about 68 years, which is pretty long time, so I think they quite used the life they separated. So, also, I think South Koreans, their life also pretty hard in South Korea, so they don't have really that space or mind to care about the North Korea issues or unification. So I think some people really want to have, but there's completely some people want the opposite they want. But I think the most South Koreans that I met, so why you guys disagree with that? They said about the financial problems, because since we have a huge financial gap between North and South, so after unification, that they're gonna suffer about the finances in terms of that, because they always comparing the German situations. Yeah, I also understand that sometimes when I give speech, also I'm just trying to give a positive effects after unification. Just I'm trying to do that for a change, but it's really hard.
Yes, the lady in blue.
Hi, my name is Yoongi. I'm from South Korea. I have 3 questions. First of all,
How about one? You only have 5 minutes left.
okay. Then I want to ask, you mentioned that there's the people in North Korea are using the cell phone, right? So I wonder if the using the cell phone might lead to like revolution in Arab. Like, would it be possible? It might lead to a revolution like the Arab Spring.
It's totally impossible in North Korea, because it's a completely different system compared with them. In North Korea, they have, I don't know how can I say that's good expression. Anyway, if you trying to do that, that means you're gonna kill your all 3 generation families, not only you. So because of that, it's impossible. And another way is, because since the government had a strong power, if the possibility is every North Koreans the protest on time all together, maybe it's possible, but which is really impossible to do that. So, and the regime, because when we growing up, we can't trust each other, even can't trust between couple. But after when they divorced, they're gonna tell government, well, she said in the past or what, and then he said. That really happens in North Korea, so it's really serious. In North Korea, also 4 people, there's 4 men can't gather together in publicly. We have many different rules, so there's many spies. Even you make there's some examples we have if you're researching for that, but in the end, there's some spies, something happens, so they can't succeed completely because of the system. Controlling system is different.
This is a very important point about the control that the regime has over the people of North Korea, and it's guilt by association. If one person is suspected of a political crime and commits and is imprisoned, his whole family goes to jail with him. So he's not only endangering himself, he's endangering the lives of his parents, his spouse, and his children. I think we have time for a couple more. In the back, please? Or... Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming. I'm Jonathan Gartner. I'm studying international development at TW. I'm curious to know to what extent you do have freedom. You mentioned you're able to sneak away to make phone calls. And I'd just like to know the limitation of the government's control over your daily life.
Can you speak up?
Sorry. To what extent are you able to exercise some autonomy over your daily lives?
In North Korea?
In North Korea.
You mean exercise?
What freedoms do you have in North Korea? For example, you mentioned making a phone. Your parents were able to receive a phone call.
That's also not freedom. We did it in illegal way. So in North Korea, you don't have totally any freedom because, as I mentioned, the freedom of movement. When I went to China, first of all, I was really surprised when I go to another province that I don't need to have any permission from the government or buying ticket. It's easy. But in North Korea, it takes so long time to go. Even the next province, we need to get the permissions. Also, that's not easy, especially if that's Pyongyang or border cities. You need to have connections or you need money for that. So totally, we don't have any freedom there. There's always spies. We need to be careful what we say to each other. But I thought living in North Korea, I thought that's pretty normal. I thought that's all world learns by that. But after I just escaped the country, I just saw the amazing real world, especially in South Korea.
We have time for one more. The gentleman in blue.
Hello, my name is Changmin from Asan.
Hi, my name is Changmin from Asan Academy, intern in the Wilson Center. Could you be more specific about what you have mentioned in the last page? What specific measure or aid you seek and hope from the international society to the North Korean defectors, which would move the public opinion of the insider that the outside world is dangerous in that case?
Actually, I've been thinking about that for many times, but it's really hard to find the answer. But I think the most important way we can do is to raise awareness, keep raising awareness. Because, every time I found there's North Korean issues, but it lasted on media only for 1 week. Especially these days, the UN COI report, which is really important, but again, soon buried by the Ukrainian issues like that. So I hope just to continue to, raising the awareness that that's, just we have the interest for that, or that's because in the past people really didn't care about the North Korean issues, or they didn't learn about that. So all I want is keep raising, and I want interest, because to help North Korea, to reach in North Korea, it's really tough, too political, you know. So also you can't have the clear answer for that first, so which I said previous answer. Helping North Korean refugees the most fast way, because North Korean refugees are having a hard time in South Korea. Even we support them, they're sending a lot of money sending North Korea. Actually, the North Korean economy runs by the defectors, the money that they send. So if they had pretty, good adjustment in South Korea, they can continue to send a lot of money to inside North Korea. So we need to see the long term for that. So I hope the international community helping North Korean refugees in many countries.
Let me close by mentioning that Hyeonseo Lee will be publishing a book later this year in English about her story, and I know I'm going to look forward to reading it and learning more, and I hope you all will take a look at it too. In the meantime, please thank me. Please join me in thanking Hyeonseo Lee.
We'll take just a second and get the panels changed once again. Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you so much again. To introduce our next panel, we'll introduce our speakers in the order in which they're going to speak. First up will be Greg Scarlatoiu, who is the Executive Director of the Committee on Human Rights in North Korea, and incredible pleasure to be the co-organizer of our event today. As we demonstrated, Greg speaks Korean. He's lived in Korea for about 10 years doing research. Prior to joining HRMK, he was the Director of Public Affairs and Business Issues at the Korea Economic Institute. Greg will provide an overview of the Commission on Inquiry's report on human rights in North Korea, and he'll be followed with remarks from Dr. Roberta Cohen, who is a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and also co-chair of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. Dr. Cohen is known best for her work on human rights and refugee issues, and she'll be speaking to what are the next steps, taking from the last question that was asked in the city, what are the next steps for the United States and the international community in response to this crisis?
Chris, thank you very much for the kind introduction. The first panel, Hyeonseo and Melanie, gave us a very clear idea of the extraordinary oppression that faces the people of North Korea on a daily basis. We also got a fairly clear idea of the plight of North Korean refugees along the road of defection, and we were also told about those elements, including the extraordinarily relentless coercion, control, surveillance, and punishment that's been maintaining the Kim regime in place for more than 60 years. March the 21st, 2013 marked a very important date for the community concerned with human rights in North Korea. On that date, the UN Human Rights Council passed by consensus, with no vote, Resolution 2213 establishing the UN Commission of Inquiry on North Korean Human Rights. The three members of the Commission, the three most distinguished members of the Commission mentioned by Ambassador Robert King in his introductory remarks, were confirmed on the 7th of May of 2013. And then on February the 17th of this year, the Commission made its report public, a report based on thorough research, extensive interviews conducted with North Korean defectors, extensive interviews conducted with experts, public hearings held in Seoul, in Tokyo, in London, and Washington, D.C. Those findings and recommendations of the Commission were made public on the 17th of February, and then on Monday of last week, on the 17th of March, the UN Commission of Inquiry, Judge Kirby, formally presented these findings and recommendations to the UN Human Rights Council. How can the Commission's findings be summarized? The Commission has found that systematic, widespread, and gross human rights violations have been and are being committed by the government of North Korea. These violations include arbitrary detention, torture, executions, and enforced disappearance to political prison camps, violations of the freedoms of thought, expression, and religion, discrimination on the basis of state-assigned social class, gender, and disability. North Korea is a country that still classifies its people into 3 categories and more than 50 subcategories based on their degree of loyalty to the regime. Violations of the freedom of movement and residence, including the right to leave one's own country, violations of the right to food and related aspects of the right to life, and enforced disappearance of persons from other countries, including through international abductions of citizens of South Korea, Japan, and other countries. In light of the gravity, scale, and level of organization of these violations, the Commission has concluded that crimes against humanity have been committed by officials of North Korea pursuant to policies established at the highest level of the state. These crimes against humanity entail extermination, murder, enslavement, torture, imprisonment, rape, forced abductions and other sexual violence, persecution on political, religious, racial, and gender grounds, the forcible transfer of population